Time of writing, I've been a victim of black magic for some 12 years, and the latest attack has lasted nearly 5 months. If you disbelieve me, that's fine. I've no desire to change your views. If you're simply sceptical, well, most of this channel addresses why I believe myself to be a victim, so there's no need to repeat it here. I awoke at 3 a.m, as when under attack I always wake up sometime after midnight. At 4 I went outside to think and felt those flu-like symptoms that I so commonly do when under attack. But is it flu? Well, that's exactly what I propose to explore in this vlog. But where this has taken me is truly profound, providing answers to questions I've been asking myself for at least 12 years. There are 2 underlying and related assumptions to the arguments that I will make. Again, I've no desire to convert you to my way of thinking. But if you're unwilling to at least consider these assumptions, you will find all that I say difficult to comprehend, as my arguments will follow each other and be nested. You'll find them impossible to follow unless you can suspend your disbelief, at least during this vlog, on my 2 assumptions. The first of these assumptions is that God is everything. There is nothing but God, thus only God matters. Everything we believe to be real is simply a manifestation of God, or lack of God. Everything we believe to be real has God running through it, including ourselves. Cut through any of God's creation and you'll find God written all the way through it, like a little stick of Blackpool rock. I doubt if this differs which religion you choose to follow, but you probably need a concept of a supreme being. The same is true for atheists. If you acknowledge a creator, you will be able to follow much that I argue. Nevertheless, this is essentially a dualistic perspective. A good many religious believers cannot accept a dualistic perspective, believing God to be separate from man, and therefore that which is God as created and that which man creates are largely unrelated, although all too often they attempt to convolute the 2 without accepting them to be one. The second assumption, and it is related, is that our reality follows our beliefs. This is important, so let me repeat it. Our reality follows our beliefs. This assumption runs completely counter to those assumptions most of us hold and have been taught. Indeed, it so contradicts everything most people believe. I'm regularly derided, even abused, for simply saying it. Because at its heart it is saying that nothing is real, which leads us back to everything is God. Yes, both of these assumptions are challenging, but they come from my experience of being a victim of black magic, and the very deep thoughts this has forced upon me. When one becomes a victim of that magic, most of us will ask, why me? And of course I did. Some might suggest that God is teaching me a lesson. Rather surprisingly, I somewhat agree. For if there is nothing to learn, then how could I make this vlog? An alternative perspective is that I've learned to submit to God. So the other question should be, why not me? Believing everything that revolves around you is a product of the ego, and we will never find God if we allow the ego to get in the way. Those who believe that God is providing me with a lesson might argue that it's God's punishment. Well, I've done much in my life that deserves punishment, including that which Muslims consider haram, and I will openly admit to still commit haram. I make no justification for my behaviour, except to say that I do not consider a Muslim to be defined by the jurisprudence they follow. Does God punish us in this life rather than the afterlife? Certainly. This is what some call karma. I see it as the universe seeking balance, and God devolves this task to his angels. Those arguing that it's a punishment for haram might then argue that it's a punishment for taking an interest and in practicing sorcery. Now, there may be some excuse in that I did not choose an interest in magic. It chose an interest in me. I was a victim long before I knew anything about magic. I considered myself a Western man of science with no real interest in magic, save an fleeting anthropological curiosity. As I learned about what's happening to me, I've made many mistakes, especially that magic should be fought with magic. A natural mistake to make. So yes, I've done many things in the past that I would not do now. Although I never really engaged in sorcery and consider myself a mystic. What I also realise is those who focus on me committing haram are selective in their definition of haram. Indeed, it's apparent to me that the list of what is haram keeps increasing and now includes many things which were simply unadvisable and other common practices amongst Muslims. But what is never recognised is that we all commit haram. I'm honest enough with myself and God to admit it. Some believe that they have the right to judge and punish others, whereas I see this as God's domain. So some see humans as bad and need punishment, whilst I believe humans to be essentially good and need encouraging. Thus, whilst I share much with those arguings that me being a victim of magic comes from God, but where we differ is that I would argue that it is a punishment, and I see it as a blessing, an opportunity, if you like. Over 12 years, it certainly hasn't felt like a blessing and more like a punishment. But if it is so that I can appreciate profound knowledge, then what else should I call it? For most of those who believe that I'm being punished, and maybe some others, they might argue that they could never be affected by magic because their faith is strong. Firstly, there's a fallacy in assuming what you do or don't experience is the same for all. This is a product of the ego, to which I will return. But secondly, they may have a point. Magic, and especially black magic, is about imposing one's will over the environment and others. So those with strong beliefs are more likely to have barriers to resist another's will. Unfortunately, those with rigid beliefs will find them severely challenged should magic get through to them. But I hope that none will experience what I have. No, I don't wish it upon anyone. Nevertheless, my openness has allowed me to refine my views, which is essential, as magic will severely test them. So being a victim of black magic is being a victim of black magic a test of faith? Yes, I do believe it to be. And it's related to me seeing it as a gift, as it has strengthened my faith. Yes, refined and changed it, but I believe it to be so much stronger for this challenge. Those with religious beliefs often argue that particular religious beliefs are the universal solution to black magic. Indeed, are the universal solution. Well, that's not my experience, and I have far more experience than most. Yes, as a Muslim, things like Al-Kursi do offer protection. Islamic ruqya may remove entities from the person, but not always, nor even in the majority of situations. Just as salt provides universal protection and removal, there'll be some spells for which this is nothing like sufficient. Well-meaning people will advise me, and I do mean they're well-meaning, they'll advise me that I should do this or that, again based on their experience or lack of it. But my experience is my experience. There are no universal solutions. This is the reason why I took an interest in Kajawan and the magical aspects of Kajawan in particular. For once you know who is sending the malevolence, when and how, you're well on the way to defeating it, especially when it's a concerted and persistent attack as I have experienced. So if you're facing a major and lasting series of attacks, it's essential to comprehend their nature. Almost certainly you will need help from somebody with some expertise in what's happening in order to do this. When we first realised we were under attack, we travelled the length of Java to visit Dukan and Ustads. The majority claimed that these attacks were not Javanese magic, often claiming them to be Chinese, even some implying that they came from the UK. This so put us off the correct track. It set us back many years, as the magic did originate in Java and was Kajawan. Furthermore, it wasted my life savings. So why were we told that this was Chinese magic? Well, I believe it was because most of those we went to for help actually didn't have a clue. As is common in Asia, especially amongst Asian males, when they don't know an answer, they simply come up with the first idea that comes into their heads. And they may have had experience in a field of magic, even Kajawan magic, but not the level of experience of the perpetrator. As the perpetrator was my Dukan brother-in-law, who spent 7 years in training in Jogja, Solo, Cirebon and Banyuwangi, and a lifetime of killing others using Pasuki and black magic. A good many of the Dukans who we turned to for help had placed jinn inside my wife, or at least that's what they believed. But these only made my wife's condition worse, far worse in fact. What are jinn? Well, I'm somewhat ambiguous. Again, these 12 years have challenged every belief I have had. And over the 12 years, I have had almost every idea you might think of. The skeptics will be shouting that they're all in my mind. And despite the effects being very real, and indeed frequently very painful, I'm much closer to this belief than them being demonic entities. They certainly seem to affect the mind, often causing pessimism. Indeed, when one's under a severe attack, the effects are not unlike what it's allegedly like to take strong, mind-altering substances, particularly those that would make you want to dance, seeming as though they're somehow rewiring the brain. So do they occur naturally, or do we pick them up? Or do magicians send them? Again, I'm ambiguous. You see, over 12 years, as soon as I settle on a belief, it's brutally shattered. Thus I've learnt to no longer hold firm beliefs. Certainly we have evidence that magic has been used against us. We have physical evidence of the spells used and of rituals. But could this be enough and be what is creating the response in our minds? Yes, absolutely. So is it enough for the magician to be seen to be practicing magic to create its effect? And our mind does the rest. But normally the symptoms predate the evidence or knowledge of what has happened. If, like I, you see time as a human construct, there's no contradiction in this. But for the skeptic clinging on to the materialist world, it's unexplainable. This is important, as most skeptics believe in the scientific logic that for something to exist, it must be able to be measured by our senses, and that this measurement can be replicated by others using their senses. However, we know that our senses are very limited and therefore limiting. For me, restricting our knowledge to what we can see, hear, touch, feel and taste is a massive arrogance. But believing that others can only sense what we can is controlling and downright dangerous. Whilst the symptoms appear to include multiple illnesses, depression and downright bad luck, I want to focus on illness. Often my wife would suffer from similar but not identical symptoms to me at the same time. When I say at the same time, I mean at the time of even at the time of day when we could feel them coming on. Again, when we're able to see the Duke and brother-in-law, this would coincide with him placing around the boundary of our home, sending his malevolence. Not at the same time, but other family members who we know had been targeted also suffered from similar, but again, not always identical symptoms. Why not identical? Well, taking a holistic approach, we would all react somewhat differently to the same spell. But we are also aware that he's using a basket of spells, which may have a greater impact on some than others. Again, this highlights that we should never assume that what we do or not experience will apply to all. But if we go back to my original premise that our reality follows our beliefs, then negative thoughts would be enough to create depression, our perception of bad luck, and even physical illness. And my views are close to what is known as the psychological theory of magic, very much a minority opinion amongst magicians. I first became aware of the connection between belief and illness when I observed that many of the symptoms of magic seem to be like viruses, or at least immune reactions to viruses. I even speculate the viruses are jinn. But what I am arguing is that illness, even aging, is a mental process. That we can believe ourselves into illness and aging. If this is true, then we can believe ourselves into wellness and youth. Crazy though this sounds, this is exactly my experience as a I say crazy, but I think the recent health crisis has made many of us rethink, or at least question Western medicine. Or if not medicine, at least the current system of primary healthcare and medication. Certainly it would seem that the current system is conspiring against the Hippocratic Oath. But it was the response to the health crisis which really brought things home to me. There seemed to be little recognition on the impact of the restrictions on the health of the person, the community, the economy, and indeed society. Of course, healers like myself would argue that Western medicine only treats the symptoms, not the underlying causes. Underlying causes which would include fear, uncertainty, and indeed poverty, all of which the response increased exponentially. What magic has taught me is that if we focus on the body's reaction and immune reaction to magic, when these are probably the signs that the body is dealing with it. Again, in the health crisis, many people were unable to visit a doctor, but many found that the body cured itself without the need for Western medicine. And I know some of you will be arguing, my so-and-so died as... And yes, I have relatives who died as well. So I'm not trying to argue that never going to a doctor is a good thing. Rather controversially, what I'm saying is that Western medicine is itself a placebo. And yes, I do understand double-blind testing, having spent most of my life working in research and research design. As by treating the symptoms, we believe that it's working and we cure ourselves. Just as Parcano and I will remove a jinn from the affected, whilst knowing that it's not us, but they who heal themselves. When making comments like this, it always seems to encourage the banal. If I chopped off your leg, wouldn't you go to hospital? Yes, I would. But in common with most of the world, there's little that my local hospital could do about it. So the arguments against sorcery are based on the assumption that this control is selfish and often involving greed or making others do what they don't want to. Well, that's certainly true for black magic, and indeed the reason why a good many are attracted to magic. Certainly some magicians never give up on this control and greed, but a good many do. But what about politics, business, the media, education, and many other things which are based on greed and control? For me, these are also black magic, as are those people attempting to impose their beliefs upon me, including religious beliefs, that attempting to control others or to take resources from others is wrong, even evil, whether through using black magic or practices we've been told are normal within this world. It's man's belief that he should improve on God's creation that causes what some call evil, and reactions to it from nature, such as natural disasters. But this is no Old Testament God seeking revenge. Simply nature needs to balance, a balance which we seem to be determined to upset. Returning to me thinking that I had flu coming on again this morning, my thought patterns went, this is not flu, but magic. So focus on love and it will go away. All too often I've suspected black magic, then felt flu coming on, and felt relieved that it was only flu. But this was almost wishing that I had flu, and would then obligingly go down with flu. Often the imposed rest would mean that once I had recovered, nothing else happened. But other times this flu was masking other effects which were developing. I once heard my favourite magician, Josephine McCarthy, say that one should not use ibuprofen to relieve the effects of black magic. This has always perplexed me, as I've found ibuprofen effective in dealing with the rheumatic symptoms I so regularly get. But now I understood. Ibuprofen masks the body's reaction so that one doesn't address the root cause through love. Thus I can rid myself of the effects of magic through love. What about the symptoms that we believe to be entirely medical? Or what about all illness? I've already told you off for being banal. No, I don't want to chop my leg off. Just as the majority of Democrats in America don't want to live in China. Could it be that we actually will ourselves to become ill? When we start to sneeze and get a headache and think, oh, that's flu, then succumb to flu. When if we believe, oh, my body's going to get rid of something nasty, maybe we would not succumb. What about aging, even death itself? Could these be when we stop fighting the aging process or succumb to what we know is our ultimate fate? So now you believe 12 years of magic has caused me to become deranged? Oh, well, if all these revelations are indicative of madness, then I'm happy to accept the label of insanity. For I intend to take this much further. What of human relations? How many times do we witness people backing down when they no longer believe in their position themselves? What of leaders? Why really did Jacinda Ardern resign when, along with Justin Trudeau, she was being feted as a world leader? And even a world leader for the new order. Even governments seem to completely run out of steam. New Labour's neoliberal economic project seemed to do exactly this with a financial crisis. And maybe this is true of society itself. Economic neoliberalism has blatantly created the problems we now face. It's now so bereft of ideas and confidence. Its only response is political neoliberalism, rebranded as stakeholder capitalism, for God's sake. But ultimately, when this techno-authoritarianism also fails to control humanity, those promoting it will grow tired and retreat to their private islands and tax havens. Rather amazingly, there's a Kajawan belief that magic exists to bring us closer to God. Like not taking ibuprofen, I'm only just beginning to understand exactly what this really means.